Boom, I'm Nick Horton. You're here at Green Climate Week. We've got a lovely panel up here. I'm really looking forward to this one. We're talking about, the subject is diversity as a key to a sustainable future. Now, this is Green Climate Week. If you're tuned in, you have drunk the Kool-Aid. So we're not going to explain why diversity is a good idea. We're not going to talk about why it is important for a sustainable future. What we're going to focus on is how we make it, how it can contribute to making the sustainable future happen, and especially where the Benjamins are, where the money is. Yeah? All right. I'm going to have my panel introduce it, starting from your right, my left. Liva, Echwald, introduce yourself. Who are you with? What's your company, and what do you do?
So my name is Liva. I'm from the NGO Found Diverse, formerly known as Female Founders of the Future. And I also own the company Intentional, together with my partner, Stine Kolding Alstrup. And in Found Diverse, we created this initiative, Diversity Commitment. And I guess in this context, that's going to be the one thing we're going to talk about, where we gathered investors to formulate common goals on diversity in regards to investment processes and internal operations. That in short, yeah.
And you've actually recently gotten Denmark's 8 largest investors to commit on paper and online to actual numeric goals for diversity. As in they have said, no more than, no less than numbers.
Yes.
Pretty exciting. Lars, boom, who are you? Why are you here?
I'm Lars Henriksen. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I'm the chair of Copenhagen Pride and also thereby one of the organizers of World Pride and Eurogames in Copenhagen this coming August. Why am I here? I believe I'm here because for Copenhagen Pride, not only do we take environmental sustainability very seriously, but as a Pride movement, as an LGBTI plus movement, I think what is even more important to us any day of the week is human sustainability and the commitment to a diverse culture within our own organization, and thereby promoting that the more diverse we are, the more we respect the individual contribution from a variety of people, the more sustainable we are and the more humanly sustainable are we.
Boom. I like it. Elin.
Yes, my name is Elin Ferm. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm the co-founder of the consultancy firm Norm, where we work to help organizations prevent discrimination in the workplace and create more fair and representative workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
Go, 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 go.
And I'm Sara. I come from IKEA, where I work with equality, diversity, and inclusion. So we have a big passion for equality in general, not only within the business connected to the coworkers, but also into the market and where we can impact other businesses. So this is a perfect opportunity to be able to impact new organizations, new business startups, to be able to, and we were a startup way back, it's been a while, but it starts somewhere. But this is a big opportunity to be able to impact that we create truly inclusive workplaces, not only branding-wise.
Boom. So, IKEA. Yeah, we are talking about the furniture people worldwide. I loved your tagline. When the late 90s in America, they came out, they expanded. It's a big country. Somebody has to furnish it. And anyone with taste will tell you the Americans needed a little bit of help at that point. But that it's also, I mean, you're a company that's really good at the bottom line. You make a lot of money, right? How does this fit into making a lot of money?
But you can't grow the business and make a lot of money if you don't have diverse people. So you need to reflect the growing market, reflect the changing market. So that's why we need also to have creative, different types of co-workers within the business.
And you talked earlier, just before we got going, about baking it into everything you do.
Yeah.
Right? And there's an awful lot of people where, with diversity, it always ends up with greenwashing. I'm not going to name the people that have large brands that have worked their way into the Pride Parade, but there was some of them you could have your suspicion that they were there solely to improve their image. And I was thinking, how do you take it from everybody's got a diversity something, paragraph, sentence somewhere on their website? How do you make it part of the business? Have you got just 1 or 2 examples, of concrete examples of how you do this at IKEA?
we decided to not have it as a separate chapter in the staff handbook, but to make it so that if I look under parental leave and I'm a co-mother, then I recognize that it says including co-mother. So it's about making it reflect in everything instead of just having it be an overall topic. Then it's also visuals within everything we have, folders, posters, making it visible that we reflect diverse people.
So if I was to go on your website and look at management, it wouldn't all just be white middle-aged men, white men in their prime.
In their prime. No, it would be a diverse group of people. And of course, we're still working our way to ensuring that we have the balance everywhere, that we have the diversity everywhere. But it starts with having people to inspire and making it visual, that you can be whatever you want within the company, because we see the whole you. And it's important that you bring your whole you, not just save it for later, save it for private. If you want to bring it, you're welcome to bring it.
So, Elin, I mean, you work a lot with, with companies trying to do this or that have realized they need to do this, but in an awful lot of cases, the question for them is how. Liva, we're going to talk about later. I have never met an investor that didn't say, when asked, why do you solely invest in white men? They would say, well, we'd love to invest in other cases, but we don't meet them. Yeah? Or if you look at law firms, the partners are almost always, 9 out of 10 partners are white men in their prime, and then when you say, they say, well, we would love to make women partners, but they all leave between child 1 and child 2. What are some arguments, what arguments work when you're working with people that get them to embrace that, get them to see the sense, get them to see the money in this?
Well, I think it's about taking a step back also and asking, like, why are these people not here, Why are we only a white panel today? Or why is it that we have a law firm with a white middle-aged men in the top? It's not necessarily that people don't want to come. It's barriers in the way of getting there. So it's trying to break it down, starting with an individual focus and also looking at the organization inside of it. How can we kind of break it up? How can we create pathways to get into this organization, also for these people to want to stay in this organization? Because sometimes you talk about diversity and you can have, a diverse crowd coming in the door, but they don't want to stay because it's not an inclusive space to be in.
Lars, I mean, you've definitely seen them. The Pride Parade's gone from being a parade for a group of people to being all of Copenhagen. Everything stops for that damn weekend. I mean, the whole town is walking in step to the same beat. How do you make it more than just a party? And how do you, what's the agenda of the year? When you're talking to people how do you get them to see past the bands?
Well, the question is whether we want people to see past that, because at the end of the day, Pride is also a protest and a way to stop everyday life and make people reflect. And I hope that by bringing so many people out for the March Day, which is a political demonstration in the street for rights, and thereby having them sort of sign on to a set of values and goals that we all unite around, we hopefully get at least some of them to check out more of our program, because, I mean, the parade is one program item out of perhaps 150 during the entire festival. And the other 149 are basically political talks, debate panels, lectures, cultural events, historical talks, and so on and so forth, that are there to educate and, of course, to raise awareness. So for me, we could never have a Pride Festival without the protest.
Cool. Because
it is a way to highlight the importance of political activism and the allowing people to sort of take back the streets that on an everyday basis are often the place where LGBTI plus people feel threatened or insecure. And by the sheer numbers, we create a safer space that day for people to be their true selves. And every year after Pride, we receive letters or emails from people saying, I never thought I would have the guts to walk in the parade, and my friends invited me, and I said, no, I'll watch from the curb. And then standing there experiencing this sense of love, really, and support from the people when my friends walked by and they waved at me and said, come on, I took that important step off the curb and into the group, and I marched as me. And if we can every year make sure that at least a few people get that experience of being themselves out in the open and finding the inner strength to do that, then we've succeeded. It's not about numbers, it's about individuals.
Exactly. You said change starts with the individual. Great line. Feel free to copy that out there. All right. So change starts with the individual, and you said, but it's also moved a lot of organizations, right? And there are 1,000,001 trucks and floats in your parade now, and everybody's on board, I feel.
When I say that change has to start with the individual, it's sort of also a call for individual responsibility, because we hear so often that, this climate debate, it doesn't work if only Denmark does something because we get the smog in from another country or whatever, or that I separate my garbage doesn't help if the neighbor doesn't do it. But if everybody comes up with that excuse, nobody will do it, and no change will happen. And I think if we look at the world, we've seen a Greta Thunberg take action on her own and start a movement. I just last week watched on Netflix, Hating Peter Tatchell, a brilliant documentary about LGBTI plus activist Peter Tatchell, who for the last 50 years has been a one-person army for human rights. And he's never stopped because he was there on his own. He has used his individual frustration and anger for the benefit of others. So I think we have to start with ourselves and say, yes, I as an individual, I am that first step to create that change. Because if I use my individuality as an excuse, we will never get anywhere. And in that sense, every day when LGBTI plus people walk out their door, take their partner by the hand and walk down the street, or dress as themselves, or do not police themselves to fit in, they are being activists.
See, this is a great thing to say. A couple of panels ago, we had some startup people on the screen over here from Jutland. We had a couple of men in their prime here, wearing dark blue, who are from large organizations. We tend to look at large organizations as monoliths, when in fact large organizations are, just like beehives, they are swarms of individuals. Liva, and you got this diversity commitment. You got these people as, again, they committed to hard numbers. And sometimes I'd love to get in the how did we make this happen? Because I thought you guys, a lot of people have tried to crack this nut. You and your partner in diversity commitment, I'm going to be clear here, this is your business partner, you guys both went at this with an interesting process, and that you invited these people in and you ran a series of workshops with them to work, and you had a place you wanted to get them to go, but it was almost like you got them to go there by themselves. Could you put a couple of words to that process? Yeah,
so just to give some numbers for people sitting home that are not experts in venture capital. Today, 95% of venture capital is invested into male-only founding teams, 4% where it's mixed men and women, and 1% where it's only female-only founding teams. These are numbers from 2020 from Unconventional Ventures, who made this report. And then when we look at the numbers, it's 22% of our startups founder, a survey by Danske Bank Growth and Impact, are women. So there's kind of a gap here and a potential. And looking into why besides the fact that venture funds are leaving deals at the table and losing money, potentially, there's also this dive into what is it that entrepreneurship is all about. It's about solving problems, right? And then once I read this LinkedIn post about, he wrote, before we have a problem-solution fit, which is kind of the starting point for any company to grow a market, we need a founder-problem fit and a founder-market fit. And then he said, because if he does not understand the problem, truly understand it, has experienced himself, he will not create the solution. And if he does not understand the market, he will not scale that solution. So he created, so this comment, he said, so then the world has a problem. And then I was like, yeah, then exactly the world has a problem. Because if only he understands the problems of the world, and that is what we invest in, then we have a problem. And when I say that 95% of venture fund is to male-only founding team, that is also documented to be within a certain range of age, with a certain ethnicity, and with a certain educational background. So we are really narrowing down into, so it's not even all men, and besides the fact, not all women.
It's highly educated white men.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you can say that.
So we're
it's
really
right.
narrowing into, if only he solves the problem for the world, we have an issue.
Yeah.
So that, and diving into that with the investors and saying, here's a potential where it's well, it would be good for the world, right?
Yeah.
It would be ethically correct because of equality. And numbers shows that it's really good business, both in terms of where there is a woman in the founding team, they have a higher return on investment. When it is a diverse team, they perform higher return on investment, right? And you are here as venture funds to earn money.
And so, but you got them to sit around a table and you gave them these facts. And you had, you had a series of 4 meetings where they, like you started with a core, Vækstfonden was interested, they're like the biggest, and they're kind of there's the state-owned investor. You got them to get on board, and then you built a coalition around it. And it was basically over 4 workshops, you got them to say what their goals were.
Yeah. So, yes, if I just to dive into it. So it's Vækstfonden, Innovationsfonden, it's Buy Founders, Pre-Seed Ventures, Seed Ventures, it's Bumble Ventures, Danske Bank Growth and Impact, and Danban that sat around the table, and afterwards others joined. And then it was, of course, a conversation where we looked into what are we going to focus on in this commitment that you are going to write. And constantly receiving feedback and back and forth. Yeah.
This building the momentum, building the consensus. That again. We all know we need to save the planet. We all know how do we build the buy-in to embrace the solutions or to reach out and grab the solutions? How do we get people to come on board? Anyone jump in on that? Go, Elin.
I mean, I think there's plenty of business arguments in terms of like...
Oh, yeah, but I was saying, like, what ones work? Where have you seen the light bulb moment? When you're talking to somebody and you see them going, oh.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's about money, right? Because discrimination, for example, increases the risk of sick days in a company. So if you want your employees to stay, you want to increase the well-being in the company. But also in terms of innovation, if you have different lived experiences in the company, you can create different types of products that suit a broader customer.
And always, we out there in the audience, a couple of examples. There's stories where you're talking to a company and you're in this situation and, okay, you saw the light. With the trigger go, oh, they responded to X. You had to...
Yeah. I think if you look at, for example, something concrete within our business as introducing new gender-neutral signage for changing rooms and toilets.
Right.
Then are we doing it for the 0.44% within the non-binary group in Denmark, or are we doing it for the 10+% LGBT plus group, or are we doing it for everybody who believes in equality and everybody who needs to stand alone? You could just need, for other reasons than not being either a man or a woman in your gender experience, but you could also just have a wish to be on your own in a room. So this is not about talking to the marginalized group. This is about talking to everybody who believes in equality and everybody who is out there in the market. If you are creating a business, it's not just hitting the ones that get it, it's all the rest of the market as well. So you're cutting yourself off from business.
Cool. Jump in, light bulb moments.
Well, you go.
Yeah. So in some of our first conversations, we created these 7 principles for even talking about. And that was the binary understanding of gender, because that was kind of the maturity level we are at in this conversation.
You have to start
we are at, that's baby steps. So before I entered into that conversation, I had been working with entrepreneurship and founders and innovation for quite some time. And suddenly I saw myself in a new conversation, and instead of, the whole conversation about building businesses, suddenly became sticky and weird and extremely emotional driven, and people were bumping heads when talking about anything that was just close to diversity. So we created these 7 principles for even talking about this topic, because otherwise we couldn't get to any new solution. And one of the principles are avoid generalizations about men or women. And I'll give you a situation where we talked to a very experienced board member, and he had been building businesses for ages and invested in quite some businesses. And he said, yeah, it's because women don't want to build professional boards. That's why they don't succeed, and that's why they don't grow. Okay, but using these principles, I was like, okay, do you have any, is that something you've experienced, or do you have read reports on this? Have you?
Do you have data, or
do you have data, or is it an experience, right? And then he said, I haven't read reports on this, but I believe that there is a strong correlation between having a professional board and scalability. And I have experienced that women that said no to doing that. Then I asked, did you also experience guys saying no to that? Yeah, okay. And then he was like, actually, maybe it's not a gender thing. It's something that I find extremely important in starting and scaling your business. And then I was like, okay, awesome. Do you want to come and join Women's Entrepreneurship Day and talk about how to establish a professional board? Oh yeah, I will, because now I can educate whoever entrepreneur I'm working with. And that's a light bulb moment where we changed the conversation. We could have discussed whether women do or do not.
Yeah, you could have argued about that single point.
We could have, that would be a weird conversation, right?
Lars,
yeah.
I was thinking, I can remember the first time I saw a big brand associated with Pride. I grew up, I've always lived in central cities. I remember Pride, I won't say I remember Pride when it started, but I've been around, I've seen it for a long time. But I can remember the first time I saw big corporates getting involved and thought, interesting. And the way I remember it was the creative industries, but I may be remembering it wrong. But I'm looking at, the move to diversity, pride, and inclusion having an impact at the corporate level, and watching corporations and companies get involved. You talk about why are they doing that?
Well, I hope, as Eva just said, that they're doing it not from a cost-benefit analysis, but because they think it's the right thing to do. And I think we have to scale the entire conversation back to that. And you were asking about my light bulb moment, and I might be sort of diverting the conversation a little bit now.
Go.
But my light bulb moment is really the pandemic that we've just gone through, and where I've realized that in so many ways we're still stuck in a colonial mindset. We're now in a global challenge, and what have we done? Reverting back to sort of the reflex of saving ourselves first and not thinking about the rest of the world. I, as a man who've lived with HIV for 25 years, know that for 40 years, we haven't been able to come up with a vaccine or a cure for a pandemic that has killed 40 million people, primarily in the global south. But because we now have a pandemic that affects straight white people in the northern hemisphere, we've come up with 5 in a year because the money hasn't been invested.
Yeah.
We have thought about vaccinating Danes before we send vaccines to other people. I think we've been so much, sorry for my language here, so much up our own asses during this that I feel embarrassed, not only about my own country, but about the entire cultural space that I'm a part of. That, again, we've saved ourselves before we look to anyone else, and I think when we look at the environment, that's exactly the same thing we have to do. We can't look at a cost-benefit analysis on that, because if we go via these theories about a hockey stick model where we assume that in 9 years technologies will be in place that will save us because we can't be bothered to do it now, we will kill ourselves. We will not have a planet to be diverse on. And the people who are most affected by pandemics and the climate change and everything are people living in the global south and who are negatively affected by this. And we have to, in that way, also recognize our own biases and the racism that is embedded in our approach to this and change.
Thank you, yeah.
It's not about money for me.
No.
It is about a completely different mindset.
Yeah.
And never again. I mean, our government, during this pandemic, and our parliament has posted billions into this to keep ourselves out of trouble. Never again will any politician have any credibility when they tell me we can't afford something. We can afford exactly what we want to do, and we can also afford a major investment in saving this planet if we want to. It's all a matter of will.
Listen, I give you a big hug for bringing impact back in, because I will say we spent most of the last week talking about how to run the business, how to get the investment in, and we have been involved. We've talked for 4.5 days about the nuts and bolts of how to get to where we need to go. We're talking about the Pride Parade. It is how to get the trucks in, how to direct the traffic, how to make it happen, how to control the crowds, how to keep everybody safe, so that everybody has a really good time. It is also, thank you, really, really worth remembering why the hell we are doing this. Boom. Boom. Love it. Jumping in most next. Because sometimes it is also we are doing the right thing, and that is why we are doing it. And I think that's also, sometimes it takes a little bit of shame, sometimes it takes, and I prefer to encourage the angels within us. But this is the right thing to do. It's in our interest, yes, but it is also the right thing. And sometimes we can do that.
But sometimes you need to know what the right thing is to do. And then you need to go and look in the market to educate yourself. Because if you are a startup and maybe you don't have anybody on board yet who is within a minority, then you don't know what you need to care for.
So something I tell the lawyers when they tell me, we can't find any women that want to be partners. And I say, well, if you want access to that talent, how about asking them what they would be interested in? Like, it's not rocket science.
No.
They're
but
right
you need
there,
to
talk to them.
Yeah. We've looked into the organization LGBT plus Denmark to get more information and have a collaboration with them on also creating some material for a more inclusive labor market. Because we could do stuff within IKEA, but we want to
jumbo company. How do you get? Because I'm not for nothing, but there are like an awful lot of employees at IKEA. I see a lot of people running around in blue T-shirts with little yellow logos. How do you get from them up in an organization? Because it's very easy to talk down. How do you include them? Nuts and bolts. Elin, maybe you can jump in on this. Like, how do you include the people, the individuals that make up any organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, like starting with yourself, looking at what are my privileges, for example, and how do they affect the outlook, or my outlook on the world. That
mirror is a killer, all right?
Yeah, but really, I mean, I think really that is what we need to do, keep turning that mirror back to ourselves and our leadership team. How can we look at the privileges that we have here in this organization and try and work with this. But also in little things like meeting culture, at a workplace, for example, looking at who gets to speak, how is the word passed around, who gets to speak about what as well. Some companies that we worked with, looking at in the coffee break, having the leadership team actually record minutes of like, who do I speak to? What do I speak to them about? That is also very different. And, it could be that people think that doesn't make a huge difference. But again, it's about creating an inclusive culture within the workplace so people feel inclined to stay and want to stay and contribute.
Yeah, it's, during all this project of getting to the signing point, we also did a pilot project with one of the matchmakers, and where it was 140 startups were to go through a selection process, and 10 were to be selected to pitch for investors. And we were a part of that process all the way through and see like where is it that biased behavior can flourish and where is it minimized. And And often people look at, so who are selected? And then, you know, is there a diverse representation here? Are we, you know, creating an inclusive culture, and etc.? But it was, in this case, we actually looked at who were not selected. So who were not selected were those that were unknown technologies, unknown market, unknown problem, unknown founders, unknown, you know, business area in so many ways, to those sitting in the selection board. And even though we were both men and women represented, our diversity of market understanding or market knowledge and technologies were simply not as wide as the 140 startups were represented. And, you know, create a system and structures where you, just like you mentioned, sometimes take notes and see what you're actually doing, right? Okay, we only focus on the 10 and ensure that there's diversity here. But what if we maybe once in a while step back and say, who did we not select? And what was the deals that we were leaving on the table just because we don't know better? And have a greater view on that. That's some of the, like, how can you then change that process? And also in selection processes, male founders and female founders are not asked the same questions. And like high risk investments, that's investing in startups, right? So you're at high risk, and from there, male founders are asked into the potential. So like, how do you win this game, right? And the female founders are asked, how do you minimize risk? How do you avoid to lose? And from here, I'm going to decide whether or not I invest in you. So if the questions you asked are, how do you win and how do you not lose? What is the likelihood of me investing in the potential versus the risk case? That's, you know, that's how we behavior influence this.
All right, we're getting into the last round. So what I'd love to, you know, Lars, you made a comment. So I'd love to hear you jump in. But I was thinking this. I'd love to hear your final reflections on, let's say, a growth hack for the audience. Yeah, something to think about that might not make a difference now, but may make a difference in the future. And where I'm going, I got an example from yesterday, which is when I was up here yesterday. At the end of the day, my podium started shaking, and I was wondering if I've been standing up for too long. And then I looked at it. It turns out it was my phone. I had 4 unanswered calls from my daughter, and so I finally sent her a text message, kind of as discreetly as I could. I'm not good at doing anything discreetly. Turns out she wanted to go swimming. Boom, good enough. So I jumped on my bike as soon as I raced over, picked her up from, met her and her best friend, she's 11, down at school, picked up my son on the way. We all went swimming. Where? In the middle of the harbor, in the middle of Copenhagen. Doing the right thing, right? We started cleaning up that harbor about 30 years ago, and it needed cleaning up. It was something that if you fell in it, you got a tetanus shot, or you at least needed one. Now it's cleaned up so that it's become this huge park in the middle of Copenhagen. Yeah, it is this huge water theme park in the middle of a city, which is pretty unusual worldwide. It has become part of, like, when we sell Copenhagen, we don't sell it as a tax haven. You know, it's got nothing to do with Dubai. We do not have a lot of sunshine. We've got an amazing quality of life, though. And so I'm thinking about these, you know, some of these diversity things that are good to do that may not make a difference now, or if you've got a hack about this is why this is a good idea, or this is how we can make change happen, and feel welcome to come in with some of the long-haired, long-vision ones, because I don't think when they started cleaning out Copenhagen Harbor that their immediate thought was, woohoo, this is going to be a huge water park. But if you could, and Lars, you had a comment to that last one there.
No, it can very easily go into the last comments as well, so no problem.
Boom. Well, take it. Why don't you go, because Liva's just had a run. So I'll let her catch her breath.
For me, this is sort of coming back to the responsibility of the individual also, because what you're describing is a lot of biases that prevent us from involving everybody. And I think, of course, it's possible to change structures, but I think the most important thing is, before we change any structures, to be aware of our own biases. And let me just use myself as an example, but this could go for sexism and racism and all sorts of other things as well. I grew up in an inherently homophobic society. And that means that I, as a gay man, am homophobic, because that's what I was taught. And until I recognize that, I'm unable to change it in myself. I will still police myself. I will still look at the way gay men represent in a sort of hierarchical structure where the more straight you act, the more attractive that is, and the more gay you act, the less attractive that is. And I think that's appalling and that's horrible. But that's what I was taught. And if I don't recognize that in myself, and the same thing goes for racism. I grew up in a racist society because Denmark is and was that, and all our societies were. And if we don't recognize that, there's no chance in hell that we're going to change it. If we just shy away from it and keep saying, don't call me a homo. I mean, I'm homophobic, but I'm not a gay basher. So that's not what I'm saying. But homophobia lives in me. Racism lives in me. Misogyny lives in me. And I have to recognize that in order to change it. So that's going back to changing structures. We have to change the structures within ourselves first in order to even recognize the structures that we need to change around us. That would be my last. Boom.
Sara, you got something. I see you.
Yeah.
Dive in.
Because I would also say that everybody could start by asking themselves, would I be doing this differently if I was in front of a different person? But we won't get everybody to do that. So all the yes-sayers will get on board, they will question their own beliefs, and they will challenge their bias. But the ones that we cannot reach, what do we do about those? And there I would say create a movement, be part of the yes-sayer movement, so that everybody wants to be part of a movement. So if you started with a really good spirit and get on board, educate, make sure that you know what you're doing, and then the rest will follow, because everybody wants to be where the sun is shining.
Yeah. Your parade is rather good at that. As in, this is a demonstration. You called it a political demonstration, and I'm like, yeah, I could do. I live near Christiansborg. I would say, more demonstrations where, when you guys go by, people want to join because it looks awesome.
But I think that ties into this thing that, unfortunately, it's not just a one-time event, right? This should be something that is happening all the time, every day in our workplace.
It's a celebration. So one time.
Well, yeah, Pride as well. I mean, that's a celebration and demonstration, absolutely. But I think the work, in terms of like anti-discrimination work in the workplace, needs to happen continuously. It needs to be baked into long-term perspectives and the organizational DNA to really have an effect. So, we often want a quick fix or a sexy solution, but actually it is looking at ourselves every day. What can I do? How can we do this differently?
All right, all right. We told this, I got up at 5:15 this morning to go running. Why? So that when I showed up here, I could stuff my face with as many Danishes as I want, as many pastries as I wanted to, because I'm on a seafood diet. If I see it, I eat it, but I run enough that I can make it happen. So when I make the workout and the payoff fit, and I think a lot of times that doing something every day, it's making a habit of something every day has to also be fit, matched with a reward, and maybe reminding ourselves in the communication is reminding ourselves of the benefits. Yeah,
for sure. But also asking, what is the norm here? What am I following? Why is it important for me to kind of balance this up, for example, with what I eat? Can I think differently around body size as well? What is the norm around body size? If we have organized events, how can you get into the building? I can walk upstairs, but I need to be aware of my privilege in that and create events where people can get into the building, even if you can't walk upstairs.
Nice.
There's a big responsibility both for ones hosting events or business startups to make sure that you're part of creating tomorrow. So making sure that you have staff systems that can handle a change in a gender, that you technically are ready for what's coming, making sure that you are, from the get-go, have it as part of your purpose in the company to ensure that this is fit for the future. And that means including equality and making sure that it's not about the majority including minority groups. It's about having an inclusive culture where everybody takes responsibility.
Sure. I mean, I would say pushing a baby carriage around Copenhagen really opened my eyes to the challenges of wheelchair access, because damn, there are a lot of curbs, there are an awful lot of, and there is a reason why Danish baby carriages have wheels about this big with lots of knobbles and off-road stuff, because that's the only way to get around Copenhagen, because there are a hell of a lot of curbs and a lot of shops with big, cool. These are opportunities.
Yeah, well,
to seize.
I mean, We work with entrepreneurship. We work with that whole space of you start with 1 or 2 people, right? To start your company diverse. I mean, it's way more easy than to change the grand corporate into something that then has to be inclusive and diverse, right? And we've talked to quite a lot of startups on this, and they're like, whoa, now we are 200. I wish someone had said from day one that this was going to be difficult, because that would have been so much more easy to be born diverse as a startup, right, than to change it afterwards. So it's a little bit like the fundament for your house. It's really difficult to change later on, but easy to make from the beginning. So that's one thing I would say for the startups sitting and listening in, and also for the investors. Lean into, remind the startups that, hey, you have an opportunity here, and the benefits are to make it a sweeter ride later on, right? And then also, this is a rather complex topic, and definitely when you talk in the broader perspective of diversity, people, you see eyes glazes out and like, whoa, how am I going to change the world right now? Fall in love with banalities. It's an extremely complex topic for many people. Fall in love with banalities. Okay, I am to ask everyone the same questions. Cool. I am to, is that how, I start to notice, when am I doing something differently, right? Fall in love with banalities. That's how we know. Today we plant a seed, and tomorrow someone enjoys the shade. That's
lovely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, I hope you guys got a lot out of this. Be the change you want to see happen. Make it. Ask, rewind, relook this, take it away, put it into action. Thank you very much. Thank you too.